Chapter 91 tested his self-control. He had failed to hold his breath, and he smelled her sweet fragrance again. It caused him to endure even more pain. Sun Chuang held Zhang Hong's hands tightly and asked him carefully, "Be careful. Do your legs feel any stronger?" Her soft voice reached his ears and sank into his heart. She was carelessly teasing him. This was a form of torture, but it also made his heart react. Zhang Hong could not help but gaze at her delicate little face and her collarbone. Instantly, it was like a magnet had attracted Zhang Hong's gaze. It made him firmly focus on that fair and tender collarbone and those bright eyes. He could not keep his eyes off her for long. Hearing Sun Chuang's question, Zhang Hong replied casually with a hoarse voice, "No." Sun Chuang supported his weight and complained, "Zhang Hong, you're too heavy. If you can't walk, does that mean you're a cripple?" She had never heard of a vegetable person waking up only to be crippled from sleeping too long. Moreover, ever since she was married into the Zhang family, she had massaged his leg muscles every day. She just did not understand why Zhang Hong's condition was so serious. "Can you stand still? I really can't support you on my own anymore." Just as Sun Chuang was about to be overwhelmed, the weight on her body lightened. She raised her head to look at Zhang Hong. She stretched out her long arm and propped it against the doorframe. "I'll do it myself." Zhang Hong's voice was hoarse. It was difficult to hide his struggle. One could tell from his taut jawline that he was enduring something tough. His profound eyes became redder and redder from effort. Although he did not say much, Sun Chuang could feel that he was very uncomfortable right now. It was all her fault for treating that medicine like a tonic. Zhang Hong even drank the entire bowl. Sun Chuang quickly retracted, but she could not help but remind him, "Be careful. I put cold water in the bath." Her eyes could not help but drift to Zhang Hong's clothes. She did not see anything unusual, so why did Zhang Hong feel so uncomfortable? "Go get the ice." Zhang Hong turned and realized Sun Chuang was staring at him sneakily. His body was suddenly taut, and he gritted his teeth and leaned to the side, blocking Sun Chuang's gaze. Did this girl not know that staring at a man like this was very dangerous? Especially at this moment. Did she really feel that he was not a threat to her? Sun Chuang regained her senses and retracted her gaze. She secretly narrowed her eyes, but Zhang Hong cut into her line of sight. He blocked her gaze. Then she was suddenly being pushed to the door. When Sun Chuang turned around, she saw Zhang Hong had already closed the bathroom door. Sun Chuang said indignantly, "Aren't you afraid of freezing to death if I get the ice?" An hour later, when Zhang Hong came out of the bathroom, the entire room was filled with an icy chill. Sun Chuang shivered and frowned. "Zhang Hong, won't you get sick if you do this?" As soon as she said that, the pillow smashed into her face, and the blanket was thrown into her arms. Zhang Hong fell onto the bed and closed his eyes. "Go sleep on the floor." Sleeping next to him was a test of his body and willpower. It was fine in the past, but he had already endured this for so long. Tonight he had no confidence in himself. Although Sun Chuang experienced some dissatisfaction at this, however, she still obediently hugged the blanket and slept on the carpet. It was better to stay away from this man. After all, he might plot against her in the middle of the night. When Wu Sensen heard Sun Chuang's story, she almost jumped up from the stool. "You said your sister gave you a prescription for impotence?" Sun Chuang pulled her down and gestured for her to keep a low profile. She whispered, "I guess my sister didn't know that the prescription was meant to treat impotence." Wu Sensen almost burst out laughing. As expected, secrets of their boudoir were much more interesting than school gossip. "That Zhang Hong didn't have it up all night, right?" Sun Chuang blushed at her words. "Not all night. He just took a few cold showers. This morning he seemed to have caught a cold, though. Mu Sensen shook her head secretly. Even in such a situation, he did not take advantage of you. Zhang Hong is really a gentleman. Sun Shuang blushed. She thought to herself that Zhang Hong did treat her well. Even though she had slept next to him every day, he was still well behaved towards her. The most intimate things they had done were 2 or 3 kisses. Zhang Hong never went overboard with her. He only let her go after seeing her embarrassment and anticipation. A man should not force himself on you. He should care about you. Sun Shuang could not help but ask what she was thinking. Do you think that he didn't touch me because he loves me? Mu Sensen almost burst out laughing. She looked at Sun Shuang's innocent face. Chapter 92. I want to challenge you. Holding back her laughter, she said, so that's what you think. Sun Shuang had a doubtful look on her face. Aren't I right? He's quite a gentleman. Mu Sensen replied, He's quite a gentleman, but I think he just doesn't like you because he thinks you're too childish. I think a man like Zhang Hong would prefer someone sexy and mature. You're too plain for him. Sun Shuang retorted, How is that possible? How am I plain? I have a good figure. You're not plain. Hurry up and let Zhang Hong have you then. After Mu Sensen said that, Sun Shuang could not help but burst into laughter. Sun Shuang's face turned red. She was so angry that she could only watch as Mu Sensen ran into Li Jun's arms. She immediately stopped laughing. Mu Sensen looked at Li Jun's red face. Li Jun's gaze fell on Sun Shuang, who was about to gloat. He walked away from Mu Sensen and walked towards Sun Shuang. He asked in a deep voice, Sun Shuang, are you free tonight? Tonight? Yes, but she was all curious about why Li Jun was asking. Sun Shuang asked tentatively, Are you busy tonight? Li Jun nodded yes. Sun Shuang was about to ask him something when Li Jun handed her a letter of challenge. I want to have a duel with you. Sun Shuang had not had a duel with someone in so many years, so she was a bit excited. She glanced at Li Jun suspiciously and could not help but laugh. Li Jun, do you have any martial arts training? Li Jun's attitude was very clear. He held the envelope closer to Sun Shuang. Do you dare to accept my challenge? Sun Shuang smiled sweetly. She was as beautiful as a red rose blooming in the white of winter. She took the challenge and said, Li Jun, you might not know this, but I'm trained in a number of martial arts styles, including Wing Chun and Chinese martial arts. I trained for more than 10 years. I know more than you do. Although she was a woman, Li Jun was no match for her. He had done nothing about martial arts. She waved the challenge notice and thought that Li Jun was quite formal about it. The look in his eyes is quite shocking. He answered seriously, I know. Sun Shuang was surprised. He knew that she had studied martial arts for a long time. Why did he come here to challenge her then? He then said seriously, Sun Shuang, if I lose, I'll treat you to a month's worth of food. You can have whatever you want. Sun Shuang knew that she would not lose, but she thought about it and asked, if you win, you won't ask me to treat you as well, will you? She had just given Sun Tzu 3 million yuan. If he asked her to pay for his meals, her wallet might not be able to handle it. Fortunately, Jen only said, you don't have to treat me to a meal. Just promise me one thing. Sun Shuang replied heroically, all right, I agree. There was no hesitation in her reply. Instead, Li Jun asked curiously, are you going to ask me what it is? Sun Shuang said confidently, I don't have to. You can't beat me anyways. Sun Shuang knew how excited she was. There was finally a fight and she could go all out. Where else could she find such a good opportunity? Sun Shuang told Li Jun the truth. It was a form of contempt. However, Li Jun did not get angry. Instead, he smiled. All right, I'll wait for you at 7 tonight. Looking at Li Jun's retreating back, Mu Sen walked over and asked, "Did he just smile? He looks so good when he smiles." He did look good when he smiled. She almost wanted to marry him. Sen Shuang shoved the challenge letter in front of her face. She tidied her clothes and said, "Get ready. Let's fight." At 7 o'clock in the evening, before the Sun family went bankrupt, she would come here for a few times a month. She was very familiar with this mansion. It was a large club in which martial artists often gathered. Sun Shuang used to have her own private space here. Therefore, she did not know many people here. Li Jun had sent a card to wait for her at the school gate as soon as she was done with her school affairs. Mu Sen glanced at the black Bentley and could not help but shake her head. Rich people are simply inhumane. Sen Shuang grabbed her arm and smiled. "Do you have the urge to marry into a rich family?" Mu Sen rolled her eyes. She sighed and said, "Everyone loves handsome men. Who doesn't like the rich? But once I enter a rich family, things might get complicated. I'll just stay an ordinary person. I'll enjoy the melodrama of a rich family vicariously through you. I'll just bask in your glory." A slender figure stood in front of the entrance of the Ling Shao Academy. He was holding an umbrella, and at some point in time it started to snow outside. This is the first snowfall of the winter, and when Sen Shuang got out of the car, she felt the chill in the air. Miss Sensen whispered, "Be gentle later. Don't hit the senior's face. He's too handsome. I'd hate to see you shove his face into the ground." Chapter 93. I Admit Defeat. Sen Shuang turned to look at Mu Sen and could not help but say, "Pervert." "You're here." Li Jun handed Mu Sen an umbrella and Sen Shuang the one in his hand. Then he turned around and walked into the hall. The snowflakes were glistening brightly against the dark night sky. They looked like fireflies dancing around him, providing a dreamy backdrop to the man's slim figure. For a moment, Sen Shuang felt that it was Prince Charming who had walked past her. The scene was so beautiful it moved her heart. Realizing that she was frozen, Mu Sen could not help but bump her arm and ask, "What are you thinking about?" Sen Shuang came back to her senses and said with a smile, "He is too beautiful. I want to draw him." Sen Shuang entered Li Jun's private space in Ling Shao Academy. It happened to be the room that she used to reserve for herself. She was so familiar with this place. Winning should be no problem for her here, right? After changing, Mu Sen ran over and whispered, "Campus beauty, please show mercy. Our senior is weak and can't withstand your torture." Mu Sen knew Sen Shuang had many martial arts achievements. She knew that even two Li Juns could not beat her, so she could only ask Sen Shuang to go easy on him. Sen Shuang made a face and nodded. "Don't worry, I won't let him lose too badly." Li Jun, who was coming out of the change room, had heard her. He frowned. How could he not let this woman go easy on him? "There's no need for you to go easy on me. I'll fight however I want. I'm not sure if I'll lose." Li Jun walked past Sen Shuang awkwardly. He did not even look at her. His back was straight and proud. Mu Sen shook her head and looked at Sen Shuang. "Senior, you're quite proud of yourself." Sen Shuang nodded. "It's his masculine pride." Sen Shuang followed him, letting him lead the way. She said magnanimously, "Senior, let's not talk about unnecessary rules. You can choose a weapon." Li Jun's face darkened and he felt insulted. He said stiffly, "There's no need." Mu Sen explained the rules outside the ring. She used to follow Sen Shuang and even fought in the ring. She could only imagine how badly Li Jun would lose. As martial artists, both of them showed respect to each other when they heard the beginning of the match. Sen Shuang took a step and got into a ready position. It was obvious that she had a strong foundation in martial arts. Li Jun, on the other hand, made a horse It was obvious that he had been practicing hard recently. However, no matter how hard he tried, it was impossible for him to defeat Sen Shuang, the former child champion, when he had only trained for such a short period of time. Sen Shuang's face was full of confidence. When Li Jun attacked, she bent down slightly, rolled around, and easily grabbed the acupuncture points in his arms. "Senior, admit defeat. I don't want to break your arm." Mu Sensen was outside the arena, immediately said, "Chuang Chuang, we agreed that you wouldn't hurt him. You've never been a good-looking person." Li Jun felt that he had been underestimated by the two women. Sen Chuang raised her leg and kicked Li Jun's calf, right at the nerve. He immediately fell into one knee and was caught by Sen Chuang. He fell to the ground and she said, "Senior, you've lost." This time he had no choice but to admit defeat. His face was on the ground. Li Jun pursed his lips and a hint of joy appeared on his face. He said coldly, "I admit defeat. I'll treat you to a month's worth of food." Sen Chuan looked at him. "I can eat whatever I want?" Li Jun nodded, "Sure." Sen Chuan looked at Mu Sensen, who was waving at her anxiously. "Can I bring Mu Sensen with me?" Li Jun got off the ground and straightened up his wrinkled clothes. He nodded calmly. "Sure, but I only promised to treat you for a month. I didn't say I would treat her for a month." Looking at Mu Sensen's disappointed eyes, Sen Chuan could not do anything about it. However, since she was promised free meals, she was fine with it. When they walked out of the venue, the sky was already dark, and the road outside was covered in a layer of white snow. The city was covered in a blanket of white. That was a stark contrast to the night sky. Mu Sensen returned home early. Li Jun asked Sen Chuan for some tips while they were still in the venue. When the two of them came out, Sen Chuan could not help but shiver. She frowned and asked, "When will your car be back?" Li Jun answered calmly, "It's snowing and the road is slippery. Mu Sensen's house is south of the city. We'll have to wait a little longer." Sen Chuan's car was still parked in Jiang's University. "It's not far from here. I can walk there." Li Jun said, "I'll take you there." Li Jun did not wait for her response before taking the lead and walking toward Jiang University. Sen Chuan had no choice but to follow him. The two of them made long shadows along the quiet street. Li Jun looked at the two figures, one tall and one short. He carefully leaned to the side until the two shadows on the ground were next to each other. Chapter 94. The Arrival of an Angel. Sen Chuan suddenly asked, "Senior, how are you going to get back?" Li Jun was frightened out of his wits. He turned his head to the side and pursed his lips. "I can walk back." She felt cold now because of the snow. Sen Chuan shivered. She looked at the streets around her. "It would not be easy to hail a taxi here. Do you want me to drive you?" Li Jun nodded immediately without any hesitation. "Sure." After saying that, he walked around the front car and toward the passenger seat. It was obvious that he was waiting for her to drive him. Sen Chuang's lips twitched and she unlocked the car in a daze. The red Maserati sped quickly into the night sky. However, it was suddenly stopped at the entrance of an alley at the corner of the university. Before Li Jun could ask, Sen Chuang rushed out of the car aggressively and headed straight for the alley. A few men were dragging Zhang Xinyan into the alley. The people were all hooligans from the surrounding area. They usually bullied the students nearby. Zhang Xinyan felt that these people were definitely drunk. She sized them up but kept struggling. She said, "What are you doing? Don't touch me. Do you know who I am? If you dare to touch me, my brother will not let you get away with it." One of the men said, "We don't know who your brother is, but soon you'll know who we are." Zhang Xinyan screamed in horror, "Hooligans!" If she had known that it was so unsafe around Jiang University, she would not have followed her sister-in-law here. Although the 4 or 5 men were thin, they outnumbered her. As a woman, how could she overpower them? They restrained Zhang Xinyan's hands immediately and dragged her further into the alley. "Let go of me. I can give you money if you want. Please, let go of me." She had never seen the horror of human nature. Everyone treated her like a princess. She could freely accept that the world was only filled with beauty. When she was dragged in, she could not feel despair yet, but now that these unfamiliar hands were on her, Zhang Xinyan finally learned what despair was. The unscrupulous voices of these people rang in her ears. In the pitch-black alley, she could not see their faces clearly, but she could smell the stench of something nauseating. Then, a clear female voice cut through the darkness of the alley. "You think she's good-looking? What about me?" Zhang Xinyan looked at the figure that was approaching them. At that moment, the person seemed like an angel. When she saw that it was Centrong, tears streamed down her face. Centrong looked at these infatuated faces and smiled mischievously. "How about a trade? Me for her. Do you think that's fair?" One of the men wiped his saliva and was so excited that his eyes glistened with desire. "Trade? We want you both." Centron covered her mouth. Her laughter reverberated throughout the entire alley, carrying a hint of coldness and strangeness. A fierce and bloodthirsty sneer flashed across her face. Her beautiful black eyes flashed. "Then, let's see if you're up to it." Centron's voice was not loud, but it gradually echoed throughout the entire alley. The girl's musical voice seemed to turn into music. The few men felt their hearts surge as they listened, and their thoughts also became infatuated with the woman's laughter. They paid no mind to the arrogance behind Centrong's words. "I like this little girl. Since you delivered yourself to our door, we won't have to be polite." Past the ground, Zhang Xinyan's voice rang out from the darkness. "Centrong, forget about me. Go call my brother." She was touched as Centrong came, but how could the two of them handle 4 or 5 men? Zhang Xinyan knew that she was dead for sure. She was the one who wanted to follow Centrong. There was no need to drag another person along with her. Centrong combed through her long hair and her fingertips as she smiled. "These guys want me. Why should we bother your brother?" One of the men laughed. "You're just a little girl. Do you think we're not fun enough? Why do you want to call your big brother? You are shameless." The tears on Zhang Xinyan's face had long dried up. Along with the cold snowflakes that fell, they landed on her hair. She felt a piercing pain from the dryness of it all. A man smiled wretchedly and said, "Pretty girl, since you're so cooperative, we'll change and be gentle." Centrong's lips curled up. She was so beautiful that it was soul-stirring. "You don't have to be gentle. Just be harsh as you want. Anyways, you won't need your arms and legs for a while." The man opposite of her finally understood the meaning of her words. Someone laughed. "This pretty girl's words are always so pleasant to hear. Whose arms and legs won't be needed after this? We don't know yet." As the man spoke, he saw Centrong, who was dressed in pink, take out an abandoned baseball bat from a pile of junk on the ground. Chapter 95. Centrong is so attractive. Centrong smiled in satisfaction. "You guys are so unlucky. I found something so useful in a place like this. What if I can control my strength when we fight later? Why don't you kneel down and beg me in advance? Maybe I'll use something smaller." Centrong's words were nothing more than a bluff for these hooligans who frequent this place. How powerful could a little girl be? No matter how powerful she was, she would not be able to withstand 4 or 5 of them. Therefore, they felt that Centrong was deliberately stalling for time. One of them let go of Zhang Xinyan and leaned towards Centrong. "I'll go first. I like the way she looks." In the dark alley, 2 dull sounds could be heard in the next second. Then the person was knocked unconscious with 2 hits. He was on the ground and one of his arms had been broken. Everyone there was shocked. They had seen ruthless women before, but they had never seen fierce and ruthless fight. Her movements were elegant and beautiful, and she did not show any mercy. Sen Shuang's voice was cold. Let's get started. I don't intend to show mercy. As soon as she finished saying that, she swung the baseball bat. She dodged one of their attacks. All that could be seen was a pink light flashing in the dark night. Then 2 more people were on the ground. They were fighting with their bare hands, while Sen Shuang had a weapon. She could easily break their arms and knock them out. She seemed to have strong arms, and every move was precise. She avoided hurting them too much and simply knocked them out with a great skill. She guaranteed that they would wake up and they would not have a concussion, and there would be no blood. One of them realized that Sen Shuang was so powerful, so he picked up a knife and pressed it to Zhang Xinyan's face. Don't move. Put down the weapon or scratch her face. Sen Shuang turned around and the gold light from the street silhouetted her body. Her gaze went to the knife in front of Zhang Xinyan's face, and a ruthless glint flashed across her black eyes. You didn't place the knife in the right place. Zhang Xinyan bit her lip. She was already stunned by Sen Shuang's few moves, but just now, when she could react, she could only ask Sen Shuang for help. Save me. I don't want to be disfigured. In the end, she felt that Sen Shuang was very attractive. She could definitely save her. Although she was not afraid anymore, she was afraid of becoming ugly. It was a woman's nature to care about her beauty. Plus, Zhang Xinyan had been adored by everyone ever since she was young. Sen Shuang glanced at her, and the smile on her face faded. Her eyes became colder and colder. Now that medical technology is so advanced, you could simply get plastic surgery if your face was cut. You could give yourself a new skin, or even change your face to become even more beautiful. What's there to be afraid of? That man was stunned. They did not feel threatened at all, since she could do plastic surgery. Although they were hooligans, they had never hurt anyone before. With that thought in mind, he could only nervously press the knife to Zhang Xinyan's neck. The sharp blade quickly drew blood from Zhang Xinyan's snow-white neck. What if I don't disfigure her? I'll take her life instead. Sen Shuang looked at the man and smiled faintly. You're really an interesting person. What you did just now could only be considered as an attempt to harm her. If you have a good attitude about the whole thing, you could probably stay in jail for a few days at most. Perhaps you would even be able to go free after paying bail. Now that you've taken out that knife, it can be considered a threat. You would be in jail for months. But if you say you want to take her life, then aren't you a murderer? I'm afraid this crime is not small. Unfortunately, I knocked out everyone else unconscious. There will be no one to accompany you in jail. You'll be alone in there for years. When you come out, do you think they'll still be your brothers? I will definitely not let you get away with this. How about this? You put the knife away, I knock you out like I did them, or you can knock yourself out. The result will be the same. People often make a big mistake when they're impulsive. Sen Shuang told him the pros and cons, and in the end it was up to him to decide. She was not in a hurry. She threw the baseball bat on the ground, patted the dust off her hands, and said, Hurry up. If you want me to do it, I'm afraid that I won't be able to resist breaking one of your legs with this thing. He felt that Sen Shuang was just bluffing for a moment ago. Now, looking at her few companions laying on the ground without any reason, the man didn't know that she was telling the truth. This was the dead end. He was just trying to keep the woman he was holding hostage. However, he did not expect that it would become a gamble for him. He would not be able to escape. Sen Shuang stood there at the only exit. Based on his observations just now, he knew that the chances of escaping from this girl were not very high. The most important thing was Sen Shuang's advice just now. He did not want to become a murderer, so fainting seemed to be his best option. His grip loosened, and Zhang Xinyan was so scared that she sank to the ground. Then she reacted and quickly ran towards Sen Shuang. She threw herself into her arms and hugged Sen Shuang tightly. I was scared to death. Thank God you're here. Chapter 96. Sen Shuang will take care of me. Zhang Xinyan hugged Sen Shuang and cried like a child. The man seized the opportunity to run. Seeing that Sen Shuang was being hugged, he wanted to run out of the alley. Seeing this, Sen Shuang hugged Zhang Xinyan, but used the tip of her foot to launch the baseball bat at the man's calf. Instantly, the man groaned and knelt onto the ground. Sen Shuang's cold voice rang out. You really don't keep your word. You agreed that you'd knock yourself out, but you tried to run away. Don't you know that I hate people who won't keep their word? As Sen Shuang spoke, she pushed Zhang Xinyan away from her arms and walked over slowly. Before the man could beg for mercy, she knocked him unconscious with the bat. Zhang Xinyan looked at her attractive sister-in-law and suddenly felt that she was a hero. Sen Shuang was too vigilant. If she was a man, she would definitely marry her. Even if the Zhang family had to compensate her, she would still marry him. You're so disloyal. I'll break another one of your legs. After saying that, she pulled Zhang Xinyan's arm and stepped on the man's body without hesitation. There were two crisp sounds, and the figure on the ground twitched a few times before it stopped moving. In the dark alley, two women walked out step by step towards the light. Zhang Xinyan looked at Sen Shuang, who was glowing in front of her, and looked at her hand that Sen Shuang had been holding. The corners of her mouth curved into a smile, and she heard the slow steps behind her. Sen Shuang turned around and saw Zhang Xinyan looking at her with a silly smile. Was this child scared silly? Sen Shuang frowned and stopped walking. She hugged Zhang Xinyan's slender waist and said, Don't be afraid. I'll bring you home now. Zhang Xinyan did not answer, but the smile on her face did not disappear. Sen Shuang looked at the child and could not help but sigh internally. She wondered if Zhang Hong would blame her if he saw his sister so scared. Outside the alley, Li Jun saw Sen Shuang walking out. He said, I've already called the police. They will be here soon. Are you all right? Although he was asking, he knew that Sen Shuang was fine. He had seen Sen Shuang fight before. She was afraid that he wouldn't be intimidated again, so she did not ask him to follow her into the alley. Instead, he stood outside to keep lookout. Sen Shuang did not mind at all. She gestured for Li Jun to move aside and help Zhang Xinyan into the car. At that moment, it was still snowing. Even if they had not done enough to the hooligans, the cold would punish them. Li Jun was about to get in the car when he realized Sen Shuang had locked it. My sister is injured. I want to take her home. You can walk home on your own. Sen Shuang started the car and drove away without hesitation, leaving Li Jun staring at the mouth of the valley. She was supposed to send him home just now, but now he was left on the side of the road. Moreover, if he did not recognize her wrongly, that lady must be a young madam of the Zhang family who returned to the country a few days ago. How did she become his sister? As soon as they returned, Lan Yibai rushed over to them. When she saw Zhang Xinyan's expression behind Sen Shuang, she looked nervously. Did you two fight? When she heard Zhang Xinyan leave today, she had a bad feeling in her heart. She thought that Xinyan was going to cause trouble for Sen Shuang. But when she called Zhang Xinyan's cell phone, she realized it was turned off. She waited for a whole day. If Sen Shuang did not come home safely, she would have been afraid that something had happened. Sen Shuang had a strange look on her face. Did you fight? Zhang Xinyan's face turned red. Lan Yibai was about to speak, but Xinyan interrupted her. Mom, don't talk nonsense. Why would I fight with her? Besides, she's so powerful. How could I beat her? Although her words sounded like she was complaining, her face could not help but turn red as she spoke. She looked like a shy little girl. If one did not know better, they would think that she was in love. Lanyard was stunned. She looked at Shen Yan for some reason and then said to Sen Chuang, Zhang Hong had been waiting for you in the room for the whole day. You should quickly head back to your room. When Sen Chuang heard that Zhang Hong was waiting for her, her heart skipped a beat. She turned around and went straight upstairs. Shen Yan was about to follow, but Lan Yabai pulled her back and asked, What do you want this time? Sen Chuang is your sister-in-law. If you continue to make things difficult for her, Shen Yan blushed and said, I'm not going to make things difficult for her. She won't find me troublesome. Lan Yabai frowned. What was going on with this child? When she saw the red mark on her neck, Lan Yabai was shocked and said, You're injured. What's going on? No matter how she looked at it, the injury made it seem that they had been in danger. Shen Yan pouted and avoided her. Mom, what are you doing? I said it's fine. This injury isn't what you think. Sen Chuang was taking care of me. Lan Yabai thought to herself what this had to do with Sen Chuang. Why would Sen Chuang take care of her? The bedroom door was quietly opened by someone and a head popped in. Before she could see the situation in the room clearly, she heard Zhang Han say, You're willing to come back? Chapter 97. You stealing a kiss is annoying. Sen Chuang jumped into the room and smiled. She swayed on her feet slightly, then skipped over to him. She pounced on the bed, resting her chin on her hands. Then she raised her pretty little face and smiled. Mom said you've been waiting for me the whole day. Zhang Hao nodded and handed her a glass of warm milk. He corrected her. I have been missing you for the whole day. Sen Chuang blushed. Her eyes were sparkling as she looked at Zhang Hong. Under the light of the crystal lamp, she was so beautiful that she could seduce people. She mumbled softly, You missed me? What do you want me to do? You can just say whatever you want to tease me. It was just an older man's way of flirting with girls. Sen Chuang had seen it before. It was just that Zhang Hong was a little better than those older men. She was just not that determined to resist. That's why she was so easily seduced by Zhang Hong. She could not help but secretly glance at Zhang Hong and whisper, You can't be still under the effects of the drug, right? At the mention of this, Zhang Hong's face soured. He had been ridiculed by Boyan for the entire day. This girl really knew how to get him into trouble. Seeing Zhang Hong's sullen face and hearing his silence, Sen Chuang could not help but move closer to him. She looked at Zhang Hong's legs with a worried expression. Are you okay? He had been awake for more than half a month. Why was it that his legs were still not in peak condition? Besides, it should not be getting worse, right? Zhang Hong felt uncomfortable under Sen Chuang's suspicious gaze. He asked in a deep voice, How do you feel about my body? Without waiting for Sen Chuang's reply, Zhang Hong's weight was suddenly on her. Sen Chuang subconsciously turned her body to the side of the bed. She did not expect to be trapped in his arms and confided to the bed. His aura was so immediate, he carefully hugged the woman in his arms. Zhang Hong lowered his head and his gaze fell on her face. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile as he seduced her like a demon. Why don't you examine my body for any improvements, Mrs. Zhang? Sen Chuang covered her pounding heart with one hand and her eyes with the other. She kept feeling that by covering her eyes and not being able to see Zhang Hong in front of her, she could pretend that his charm did not exist. But one had to know that an older man was adamant about seducing a woman was dangerous. Zhang Hong reached out and grabbed her hand. He flipped her hand over and pressed it to the top of his head. He smiled and said, Why are you covering your eyes? The smile on Zhang Hong's lips could not help but become more pronounced. Looking at Sen Chuang's red face in his arms, he said in embarrassment, I was afraid that you would not let me see you. After hearing that, she quickly closed her eyes. She did not dare to show her expression anymore. Her little red face was brightly illuminated under the crystal lamp. Zhang Hong was amused by her nervous expression. He could not help but lower his head and whisper into her ear, "What's wrong with looking at me? We're husband and wife. What's there to be afraid of?" The man's breath were beside her ear. He carried masculine warmth when her sensitive skin reacted. She told herself not to panic, but she was still provoked. Senchuan opened her eyes wide. She said fiercely, "Who said I don't dare to look? It's up to you. What do you think you can do to me?" The man above her suddenly lowered his head and kissed her firmly on the lips. He immediately stopped Senchuan from talking. Senchuan was in a daze. "Why are you kissing me again?" Zhang Hong laughed softly. "Why? Can't I kiss my own wife?" Zhang Hong watched as his wife used the blanket to cover her face bit by bit. His muffled voice came from under the blanket. "You're so annoying." Her pair of jet black eyes darted around. She was so guilty that she did not dare to look at Zhang Hong's face. She used the blanket to cover herself as if she could not see his mouth slowly curling into a smile. She curled up under the blanket. Zhang Hong looked at her bashful appearance and smiled. "Am I really that annoying?" Senchuang's voice was muffled because of the blanket. "You steal a kiss from me is just annoying." So it turned out that Zhang Hong had been thinking about her the entire day. He had been thinking about her for the entire day and wanted to kiss her. Indeed, men's minds were complicated. They were not at all simple. Zhang Hong chuckled. "Don't tell me you want me to kiss another woman." As soon as he said that, the little face hiding under the blanket instantly turned cold. Her black eyes had also lost their humor. Then she glared at him angrily. Zhang Hong's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. But before he could speak, he saw Senchuan lift the blanket, push him away, and sit up from the bed. Her face was serious and her voice was clear and bright. "You kissed another woman, haven't you?" At this moment, no man would be foolish enough to admit it. Senchuan looked at Zhang Hong's face. He quickly replied, "No." She smiled coldly and threw the pillow at him. "Liar." Chapter 98. The Land in Dangshan City. Without waiting for Zhang Hong to react, she rushed into the bathroom in a huff. Zhang Hong rubbed the space between his eyebrows helplessly. This little girl was not easy to comfort. Early the next morning, snow covered all of Lin City. The white scenery made one's heart feel a little brighter. It happened to be a holiday. When Senchuan woke up early that morning, she was pulled into a bedroom by Zhang Shenyan. Only Zhang Hong and the two dogs were in the room. The two small dogs quietly nestled beside his legs. In just a short month, these two dogs had changed immensely. They looked so different compared to when Senchuan first found them. Their fur had also become more shiny and thick. They were like two soft toys propped up against Zhang Hong's legs. William came over to check on them. He glanced at the gloomy Zhang Hong and could not help but tease. "You're becoming more and more expressive recently. You don't even hide your anger anymore. Why is that? You look like you're trapped by love." William looked at Zhang Hong, who was looking back coldly. He could not help but ask, "Where's Senchuan? Isn't she always by your side? Why did she leave you alone today? Did you have a fight?" William looked as if he had seen through him. Zhang Hong pursed his lips. "She complained that I kissed another woman and refused to sleep with me." William could not help but laugh unkindly. "So you've been forced to separate? You must be miserable. We're mature men in our 30s. Can't you handle a 20-year-old girl like Senchuan?" Zhang Hong could not help but frown. "She's young. Why should I care about her?" William smiled and said, "She's young. If you don't care about her, you can keep making that face. However, are you waiting for her to come back on her own?" Zhang Hong nodded. "She's sleeping in another room. She's not used to it. She won't stay there for long. Boyan could not help but give him a thumbs up. He had been unconscious for a while, but managed to develop stellar observational skills. But your leg is almost healed. Do you want to tell Sun Chuang? I see that she's very concerned about you. If you keep this act up, she might get overly anxious. What if she finds out that you lied to her? Won't she be angry? Zhang Hong's gaze was deep, and he said coldly, "There's no need. Zhang Yelling and his son will believe it. How's the Zhang Corporation situation over the past 2 days?" When the subject became serious again, Boyan's expression became even more severe. He adjusted his glasses and said, "It's not too good. During the 6 months that you were unconscious, the second son and his father took over half of the Zhang Corporation's project. They even secretly switched many suppliers and partners. Now they have taken out more than half of the funds. If you return to the company now, it will be very difficult for you to make a comeback. You might even anger the father and son and make them desperate." The old man was old, all right. His method and senses were no longer adequate. When Zhang Hong had fallen to the coma, the entire Zhang Corporation fell into turmoil. Although the old master had stepped in to support him, he could not keep all the shareholders happy. The individual shareholders began to have doubts, and Zhang Hong's chances of waking up were not very high. As a result, more people sold the shares of the Zhang Corporation, and some became direct supporters of the Zhang Tinghao. After all, from the Zhang family's point of view at that time, Zhang Tinghao had already become the only successor. Half a year's time was enough for some people to swallow more than half of the enterprise. Zhang Hong's eyes gradually darkened. His sudden awakening had already made others more vigilant. It was indeed not a good time to return to the Zhang Corporation. Boyan raised his eyebrows and said, "But I discovered that this father and son pair seem to be very interested in a piece of land." Zhang Hong said, "The piece of land in Dongshan City?" Before he fell into a coma, he had paid attention to it. That piece of land was very large in size and its location was good, but it was very difficult to develop it. It required a large amount of capital investment. It was not something that an ordinary person could bear. Although he could get it, the Zhang Hong from half a year ago would have found the later stage construction funds to be difficult to bear. Boyan nodded. "It's the piece of land. Why would the second son and father be after a piece of land like that?" Zhang Hong could predict all of Boyan's questions. The corner of his lips curled into a cold smile. "Because an international airport will be built there within 6 months. By then, that piece of land will be able to double the profits." Boyan was stunned. No wonder that father and son pair think so highly of it. Should we pay attention to it? If this father and son pair were to get their hands on it, it would probably be even harder for the Zhang family to get it all back. Zhang Hong said in a deep voice, "You just need to observe how this piece of land will be auctioned off. You don't need to worry about anything else. It's best to create some momentum and say that I'm very optimistic about this piece of land." From the looks of it, he could choose a good day and return to the company early. Boyan asked curiously, "You want to buy this piece of land? Wouldn't this be helping the 2 idiots in the second batch?" Zhang Hong sneered. "That land is connected to Dangchen Mountain, but the usable area is not that big. Dangchen Mountain is a government-level environmentally protected area, so the entire mountain cannot be moved." Chapter 99, Seizing the Zhang family's property. Boyan said in surprise, "And why do you still want to buy it? Are you crazy?" One could only take a look at most government-protected areas. The Chinese people had been paying more and more attention to the ecological environment in recent years. For enterprises to develop, sometimes they had to consider not only the market, but also the environment. Zhang Hong continued, "We know about this problem, but I'm afraid that the father and son don't. He had already given up on the plot of land when the plan for the new city airport came out. It was just that he happened to be in a car accident before he had a chance to explain it to them. He did not expect that Zhang Yeliang and his son would take a fancy to that plot of land. Boyan raised his eyebrows. You mean to throw this hot potato over to them? The father and son used the Zhang Corporation's money. Only Zhang Hong could do such a thing. But this was the only way to make up father and son release their hold on Zhang Corporation. Boyan raised his eyebrows. All right, you can stay at home and nurse your legs. Leave the other things to me. You just need to settle your wife. Without waiting for Zhang Han to lose his temper, he quickly packed his things and walked out. Shen Yan was pestering Sen Chuang, but she managed to get away after expending some effort. The moment she walked out, she saw a boy coming out of the room. She quickly went forward and asked, How are Zhang Hong's legs? When will they recover? Boyan felt guilty as he adjusted his spectacles and snorted. I have to ask you this. Didn't I tell you you need to constantly massage his legs every day? He also needs to exercise every day. If you're not going to massage him, what are you going to do? Sen Chuang snorted coldly. There are so many servants at home. Why should I be the only one massaging him? Boyan looked at her and said, The servants are not familiar with the pressure points. A few random massages won't be of much help to him. Back then you agreed to it because my aunt was there. Now you're not doing it anymore? I could only tell her that Zhang Hong needs these massages every day. Wasn't it obvious that he was going to complain? Sen Chuang immediately said angrily, Don't tell my mother-in-law. If you dare, I'll break Zhang Hong's legs and cripple him. Then I'll tell my mother-in-law that you asked me to do it in order to seize the Zhang Hong's family property. William looked at Sen Chuang in surprise. This girl was really vicious. She could even make up such a reason. He was really impressed. He could not be bothered to say a word. Zhang Boyan quickly grabbed a medicine box and ran away. This couple was ruthless. No wonder they were fighting. They really deserved it. Sen Chuang watched him leave. She turned around and pushed open the bedroom door. Zhang Hong looked at Sen Chuang, who had returned without batting an eyelid. Seeing that she had walked into the bedside, he grabbed her wrist. Sen Chuang rolled her eyes. What? Zhang Hong chuckled and said gently, Are you still angry about what happened last night? Women are so stingy. Sen Chuang tried hard to free her wrist, but he was too strong, so she fell into his arms. Her face hit his firm chest, and he used his other hand to snag her waist. Zhang Hong could not help but raise his eyebrows and pinch her waist. Sen Chuang immediately raised her head and glared at Zhang Hong. When she saw the smile in his eyes, she could not help but blush. She grabbed his shirt tightly with both hands and said softly, Shameless. Zhang Hong's voice was throaty and low, but it sounded affectionate. You just crawled into my arms, but you say I'm shameless. You can't do whatever you want just because you're young, right? He held her waist tightly, making her realize that she could not get up. She could only stay in his arms obediently. She raised her head with difficulty and said angrily, How can you do this? Zhang Hong smiled and said, What about me? Sen Chuang blushed and said, You're acting like such a hooligan. Zhang Hong chuckled. He looked at her red lips and said softly, What's wrong with me acting like a hooligan in front of my wife? Sen Chuang said proudly, If you continue to do this, I'll tell your mother that you're bullying me. I'm still young anyway, so she'll believe whatever I say. Sen Chuang looked smug, like a child who had received a new toy that others would be jealous of. Zhang Hong was amused by her logic, and his fingertips touched her lips, and he said softly, You know, she's my mother. How can a mother not side with her own son? Besides, I want to fulfill her wish to have a grandson as soon as possible. Even if what you said is true, she will only support me. Sen Chuang was shocked by this explanation. You want to consummate the marriage with me? He said that he wanted to fulfill Lan Yabai's wish to have a grandchild. Didn't that mean that he wanted to lay his hands on her? When she thought of the things that she had to accomplish before giving birth, Shenchuang's entire body reacted. The enclosure of Zhang Hong's arms suddenly felt like a wolf's den. He could take it at any moment, and she didn't want that. Zhang Hong was stunned by her shocked expression. He stared intently at the woman beneath him and said, "You don't want that?" Chapter 100. You want to date me? Shenchuang struggled and said, "Of course I don't want to. Let me go." It's not that she did not want to, but she did not dare to. No matter what, it was her first time. Would she seem so easy to have agreed to it right away? Shenchuang broke free from Zhang Hong's embrace and rolled off the bed and quickly took a few steps back. She looked at the gloomy-looking man on the bed warily and bit her lip. "We did not date. Our relationship has no foundation." Zhang Hong looked at her, his dark eyes seemingly devoid of warmth. "So?" There was a hint of displeasure in his words. Shenchuang did not notice the coldness in his face. She said softly, "No matter what, we should be in a relationship first, and then..." She was only 20 years old, and the rhythm of her life was already completely messed up. She was married without having a relationship. She could not continue to mess it up by heading straight to the last step now. She still had to date. Zhang Hao chuckled. "You want to date me?" He had already gotten the trophy, but now she was telling him that it was against the rules and that he had to start all over again. He had taken so many shortcuts in life. When he realized that Shenchuang wanted to take away his advantage, Zhang Hong, her legal husband, felt that it was impossible. Shenchuang poked him and lowered her head to whisper, "I didn't. I insisted that you talk." Looking at Zhang Hong's dark expression, she coughed and hurriedly said, "If you don't want to talk, then don't talk. I'm talking. I'm going to take a shower first." Before Zhang Hong could say anything, Shenchuang hurled herself to the bathroom. She wanted Zhang Hong to fall in love with her. As expected, she had gone crazy. Just before winter break, Dion University had prepared a fashion competition. All the students from the fashion department had to participate, and the most famous fashion companies and design big shots in the industry were attending. The first-ranked design work had been adopted by famous clothing companies in the industry, and they would be produced ready-made clothes for sale in the market. For the students, making their own clothes into finished product and having ordinary people wear them would have a great sense of accomplishment. Shenchuang had once thought that every man and woman on the street would one day wear her clothes that she designed, so that this year-end big assignment. Shenchuang began to lock herself in the studio every day and seriously designed. Even Mu Sensen felt that Shenchuang, who was suddenly so capable, seemed like she was about to turn over a new leaf. She could not help but tease her. "Darling, you've been very stimulated recently." Shenchuang rolled her eyes at her, lowered her head, and drew lines seriously. She whispered, "What do you see on my face?" When Mu Sensen heard that, she immediately came over with a face of excitement. "Senior Li Jian is treating you to dinner every night. You should be hungry." Was she hungry, or was Mu Sensen hungry? Shenchuang said, "I remember that he said that he would treat me to dinner for a month. I can't bring someone along, right? Besides, I have something to discuss with him tonight." When Mu Sensen heard that, she immediately hugged her arm, leaned her head against her shoulder, and nestled into her. "Is there anything I can't know? You're secretly meeting another man behind Zhang Hong's back. Aren't you afraid that he'll go berserk at night and take you? You're like this pure innocent girl." Shenchuang was unmoved. "Stop it. Zhang Hong will never know." However, she was really a little guilty. If Zhang Hong ever saw her having a meal with another man, what would his expression be like? She thought about it and was looking forward to it. Mu Sensen sniffled, but did not let go of Shenchuang's arm. "If you don't bring me along, I'll tell Zhang Hong that you finished your month's worth of allowance. If you don't save me, I'm going to really starve to death in your arms." Sen Shuang finally looked at her. Your living expenses are gone so quickly? Mu Sensen nodded. Our family isn't wealthy. Our living expenses are only that little every month. 2 days ago, just because I bought a dress, we ran out of money. Sen Shuang understood. If you buy a dress, you can't pay for your meal. Then you'd starve to death. Mu Sensen looked indignant. Do you care at all? Sen Shuang packed up her things and stood up. I do. Mu Sensen looked at Sen Shuang, who had left, and pounced on the table. That woman is too cruel. The heavens want to kill me. Suddenly, Sen Shuang's voice came from outside the door. After our meeting, I'll bring you a barbecue. Mu Sensen quickly sat up straight in her chair and said excitedly, Shuang Shuang is the best in the world. Sen Shuang did not expect Li Jun to invite her to a barbecue restaurant in the end. They seemed so alike on the same wavelength that she suspected Li Jun was simply a part of her. Sen Shuang ate impolitely and could not help but say, Mu Sensen wanted to come, but I couldn't let her. I told her I would bring some back for her. Li Jun asked, why didn't you let her come? Sen Shuang did not expect him to ask that.